Okay, hi guys, we are going to be talking about Act 1, Scene 7, the last scene in Act 1 now, where we are in Macbeth's castle. Um, it is a complicated scene, and there's a lot that I want to talk about. I want to talk about the language, I want to talk about the characterization, I want to talk about the structure of the scene, a little bit about the setting as well. So make sure, absolutely sure, that you've looked at my screencast for Scene 5 and Scene 6, and that you've already read this scene through at the beginning, because I'm really going to be breaking down quite a lot of what's going on here. It's one of my favourite scenes in the whole play. There's such complexity of character being shown. There's such complexity of the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth being shown. So I want you to really have that in mind, what their relationship is like previously. Okay? And it opens with a soliloquy from Macbeth. So a soliloquy, just to remind you, is a moment where our main character, usually our tragic hero, Macbeth, the title protagonist of the play, engages with the audience. So no one else is listening to him. It's just Macbeth on stage talking to the audience, and it's a way for him to kind of explore his thoughts, explore his issues, and kind of get to the bottom of what's going on in his head. So we're left with Macbeth in this situation, and Macbeth is that they're hosting Duncan at Macbeth's castle, but Macbeth is not there. Okay, we see enter a sewer and divers servants. So this isn't a sewer like an underground sewer. This would be a type of server who would be working at the feast with dishes and service and pass over the stage. So they're making it very clear to us there's a feast going on, but it's not happening here. It's passing on. And then we enter Macbeth, the host of this castle, and he is not at Duncan's feast. He has gone off back somewhere because things are troubling him, right? So he's gone off on his own, moved away from the feast where he should be hosting his own thing, and he looks to us as an audience and he starts to talk through his thoughts. So I'm going to read through it and then stop at different points. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success, but that this blow might be the be-all and end-all here, but here, upon the bank and shoal of time, we'd jump the life to come. So he's saying, if we could just do this now, kill him, and that would be it. It would be over. There'd be nothing else that would happen. It would all be finished. Then yeah, we'd do it. I'd do it. I'd do it right now. Right? If this was going to be the be-all and the end-all. This is a lovely little bit. One of the reasons I love reading through Shakespeare is seeing where these iconic lines appear that become part of normal English idiom. The be-all and the end-all is something that we now use as part of our language. But he's saying if this was it, if it was all this blow, this one murdering of Duncan could be the be-all and the end-all, and it just, that be it and be over, then yeah, I'd do it. But then he says, but in these cases, we still have judgment here. He's aware that there comes judgment for doing such things. And he's not just talking about the judgment of other people, he's talking about several things. He is talking about the judgment of other people, if they found out. He's talking about the judgment of the heavens and God, and that moral judgment. And he's also talking about internal judgment. He knows that he's going to be racked with guilt if he were to ever do such a thing, right? So there's kind of three layers of judgment that he's thinking about. In these cases, we still have judgment here. Here on earth, things don't just end. There is no be-all and end-all. There are always consequences. And this is something that Macbeth is very, very aware of. So he starts to go through some consequences. That's what's in his mind. He's thinking about doing this act, and he's starting to think about, right, what are these judgments going to be? What are these consequences going to be for me? His first one is, and he starts listing them, almost like he's pacing back and forth, listing these ahead. His first one is, that we but teach bloody instructions which being taught return to plague the inventor. So we've come across this concept before in this play, the idea of karma, right? The idea that if we do things they come back on us. He says, we teach bloody instructions, we do bloody things, and then when they are taught, when they are done, they return to plague the inventor, the person that taught them. So if you do bloody things, evil things, they will come back and haunt you and plague you. And he continues this by giving this metaphor that this even-handed justice, so this karma, even-handed justice, you do bad things happen, commends the ingredients of our own poison chalice to our own lips. So that metaphor of the poison chalice, the poison cup that he's going to give to Duncan to kill him, he will be drinking it himself if he does this. He knows this. He knows that doing bad things mean that bad things come back to happen to you. And so he comes up with more reasons now why this is bad. He says he's here in double trust. The trust that he's putting in Macbeth is not just one type of trust, but it's two types of trust. First, I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed. So, kinsman, they're friends, and he's his subject. Duncan is his king. Both of those should be very strong against the deed of killing Duncan, right? And then secondly, then, as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. So he's hosting Duncan in his own castle. So that's the double trust. He's not just his subject and his friend, he's also the host. He should be protecting him. And yet he's thinking of killing him. And then he provides more reasons. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. So he's talking about how wonderful Duncan is, how everybody loves him, how he's angelic. To kill such a man, heaven surely will pay him back for that. And he knows that pity, like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. He knows that Scotland will mourn Duncan's death, that this horrid deed will blow in every eye, and tears will drown the wind. So, just before we get to that last line, let's look at all the different reasons he's giving himself here. He's saying, look, I could do this right now, but there's going to be consequences. It won't be the be-all and end-all. There is judgment here on earth. You can't just get away with anything you want. There is karma. If you do bad things will come back to bite you. He is here in double trust. I am his friend, I am his subject, and I am his host. Duncan is a great king, and Scotland will mourn his passing. People will be really, really sad if this happens. So why am I doing this? Well, he knows it. He says, I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition. He says, that's my only reason. He's made a list of pros and cons. That's what he's done. And in his con list, he has about 8 things. And in his pro list, he's got ambition. What does he think of ambition? He describes ambition as something which overleaps itself and falls on the other. He realizes that being too ambitious is something that comes back and bites you and just collapses and falls and is not going to take you anywhere. Okay? So he's got about 8 cons, he's got 1 pro, and he's not even a big fan of that pro. He doesn't want to do this. He's thought about it. He's here at this feast with Duncan. He's gone off into the back room and he's like, I don't want to do this. This is a terrible idea. And this real humanizing moment for Macbeth allows us as an audience to be like, oh, he's not evil. He's been manipulated by witches, by other people. He's not evil. Who wouldn't be a bit ambitious if somebody came and told you that you were going to be king? Who wouldn't think about some of these things? But here we see that, he knows what's right and wrong. Then we have enter Lady Macbeth, who, as we've just seen in scene 5, knew that this would happen, knew that his husband is too full of the milk of human kindness. How now? What news? He asks. Now, Lady Macbeth is all business, right? She shows up and she's like, He's almost finished dinner. Why have you left the chamber? What are you doing here? Why have you left? And then they have a little bit of an exchange, and then Macbeth says very, very clearly, we will proceed no further in this business. And then, gives some of the reasons that he's been thinking about. Here's another reason, actually, that he gives that he didn't even mention in his soliloquy. He hath honoured me of late, and I have bought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which would be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. So he's saying, Duncan's given me so much, he's made me the Thane of Cawdor, why don't we just enjoy that? Why cast that aside? Why throw that away? Again, we have the imagery of clothes being worn and clothes being cast aside, as taking on roles and giving away roles, okay? Note how that crops up in the play at different points. Now, how do we think Lady Macbeth is going to respond to this? She's planned all this, she's got excited. Macbeth's like, no, I don't want to do it. Lady Macbeth turns around and gives, across this scene, one of the harshest indictments of Macbeth's character that I've ever seen, and that I've seen in any play, really. And we've got to set this against the fact that just in scene 5, they talked about being, companions in greatness, that they're really close to each other. And yet, here, Lady Macbeth absolutely lays into him. So I'm just going to look through some of the things that she says in order to convince him that he should do this. Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since, and wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? So she's saying, what happened? What happened to the hope that you had to becoming king? And then she's kind of accusing him of being cowardly, to look so green and pale. Is there an issue that you're not manly enough to do this? Are you cowardly? Are you give up on things really easily? Is that your issue? And then she says, from this time such I account thy love. So she's saying, oh, that's how much you love me, is it? You're just going to give up on this? She's equating the murder of Duncan with him loving her. And if he's going to give up on one, he's basically showing her that he doesn't love her. Now that is harsh. And then she continues, art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valour as thou art in desire? She's saying, are you scared to be brave? Are you scared to have valour? Are you scared to be the same in your actions as you are in your head? Now this is harsh for someone who has built his life on being a brave soldier, right? A brave general. We've seen the Macbeth that wins wars, and here he's being torn apart by his wife. Wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem? Letting I dare not wait upon I would. Saying, are you always going to be scared? Are you always going to say, oh, I dare not do this, I'm too scared to do this, I'm a coward? How do you think that's going to make Macbeth feel, right? He replies, prithee, peace. I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none. There is nobody who is more of a man than me, he says. He knows this. So she replies, what beast was it then that made you break this enterprise to me? She's saying, if a man wouldn't do this, then who was it that wrote me that first letter? When you durst do it, then you were a man. And to be more than what you were, you could be so much more the man. So again, suggesting, playing to that ambition. So on one side, she said, you're a coward. You have no valor, you have no bravery. And on the other side, she's bringing up that ambition, saying you would be so much more of a man if you could do this. So she's really playing with his mind here. And then, this is where it starts to get really dark. Nor time nor place did then adhere that you would make both. They have made themselves that their fitness now does unmake you. I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. But I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this. Now this is a really commonly interpreted bit of Lady Macbeth's speech, where she's talking about a child that she had. Now, there is no suggestion anywhere else in the play that Lady Macbeth and Macbeth have any children. So the implication here, the way that most people read it, is that they had a child that died young. She says, I have given suck and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. She says, I've breastfed a young child. And suddenly, we're reminded of all these references to milk that we had in scene 5, right? And the love and the compassion that comes from the milk of human kindness and the milk from my woman's breasts and all of those sorts of things. So we're starting to get some backstory as to why Lady Macbeth might be so screwed up, right? She's tried to show love and compassion to something earlier in her life, and it was taken from her. And so she is, in a sense, now just filled with cruelty in response, right? And then she uses that. She uses the death of their child in order to manipulate Macbeth into doing this act. She says, I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this. So if I'd sworn that I was going to kill Duncan, like you have, I would have killed my own child to make it happen. And what? You're just scared because you're a little bit worried that it might be a bad thing to do. Now note the structure of Lady Macbeth and Macbeth's conversation in this scene, just before we move forward. Okay? Who's doing all the talking? Lady Macbeth is doing all the talking. Okay? And in response, we get very short phrases from Macbeth. Lady Macbeth is dominating this conversation. And note how what Macbeth says each time gets weaker and weaker. Lady Macbeth comes in and he says, we will proceed no further in this business, as if he's in control, right? Lady Macbeth has her whole thing. Macbeth says, prithee, peace, as in, like, please, like, calm down, I am still a man. Lady Macbeth does her whole thing. Macbeth says, if we should fail. Suddenly, he's not worried about the morals anymore. She's beaten that out of him. She's weakened his argument one by one until Macbeth is stuck on this, but what if we fail? To which Lady Macbeth replies, we fail, but screw your courage to the sticking place and we'll not fail. And then she gives her plan of what they're going to do. Straight away, she knows she's got Macbeth at this point. She knows she's like, he's over his whole milk of human kindness nonsense. I've got you. Now you're all worried about the plan rather than the act itself, right? Now I've moved you past should we do this or not. Now I've got you to if we should fail. So you're wondering, what's the plan going to be? How are we going to get away with this? She's won. She knows she's won. So she gives the plan. Duncan's asleep. Basically, she's going to wine and wassail him. So wassail is a type of alcoholic drink as well. So she's going to get everybody as drunk as possible at the party. She's going to get his 2 chamberlains as drunk as possible. So they're the 2 guards that would stand outside his door. And then, as everybody is in swinish sleep, their drenched natures lie as in a death. So as everyone's basically passed out because they're so drunk, what cannot you and I perform on the unguarded Duncan? What not put upon his spongy officers who shall bear the guilt of our great quell? So she's saying we can kill Duncan, and we can frame the drunk officers who have been outside the door. And we'll see that later on. We'll put the knives on them, make it appear like they did it. Easiest thing to do in the world. We get some gender stuff coming back here, where Macbeth replies, bring forth men children only. For thy undaunted mettle should compose nothing but males. She's recognizing that there is no femininity in her anymore. She has not got any female compassion or kindness. It is gone. She is this brutal, undaunted, strong murderer. But she has convinced Macbeth. So for all of his issues with guilt at the beginning that were plaguing him, she's come in and with a few short speeches, she has torn him down. And now he is willing to do it. he's up for it. And it ends with him saying, "I am settled, and bend up this corporal agent to this terrible feat. Away, and mock the time with fairest show." And then again we get this theme of appearance and reality here, of hiding what's underneath. False face must hide what the false heart doth know. Interesting that he calls his heart a false heart. He still recognizes that this is the wrong thing, but he's going to do it anyway because his wife is crazy. This scene gives us some really interesting insights into Lady Macbeth's character, her background, why she is the way she is. It gives us some really interesting insights into Macbeth's character, the fact that actually he's got quite a good awareness of right and wrong, but he is being manipulated by Lady Macbeth, by the witches, on all fronts into this terrible act. And it also gives you a really interesting insight into their relationship. She is definitely the one that wears the pants in this coupling. And despite the fact that he is the brave general on the battlefield, when he comes home and he's back at his castle, it's pretty clear who runs the show, right? It's pretty clear when he attempts to say, "We'll proceed no further in this business." Lady Macbeth basically just laughs in his face as if like, "Do you think it's up to you? You really think it's up to you?" Well, it's not. And she tells him why. And at the end, we see him be completely dominated by Lady Macbeth, and eventually them being on the same page. And we know that they're both going to go off, and Macbeth has agreed that he will do this. He will kill the king and perform this act. And that is the end of Act 1.